A false dwarf is simply a rabbit that you get when you breed two dwarf rabbits together and they do not carry a single dwarf gene. Normally when you breed two dwarfs together, they have the dwarf gene and then they have the regular gene. 50% of those babies will be true dwarfs in that they carry a single dwarf gene. 25% of those will be double dwarfs, also known as peanuts, which is the fatal part of the gene. And then the other 25 will be false dwarfs, meaning from both parents, those rabbits gained a normal gene. So normally what we see in a false dwarf is a rabbit that should in theory be a dwarf, but isn't. So it doesn't have the characteristics of a dwarf. It doesn't have the very small head, bulging eyes, and small ears with a small size. It has a normal, regular, elongated cranium and ears with normal eyes, and normally they get out of weight for the dwarf standard. So just to give you an idea, this is Sadie. She is a true dwarf. This is Penguin. She is a false dwarf. When it comes to our meat rabbits, such as our silver fox, our Californians, and our Rex, we wait until the smallest baby of that litter is around 5 pounds live weight, which means the larger of the litter is normally around 6.5 to 7 pounds. With that being said, after everything is butchered out and we get a butchered weight on everything, we normally get around 4 to 5 pounds of meat per animal. Now, if we're talking about fryers from our mini Rex, we normally get about 3 pounds of meat by the time we butcher them out. Less meat on those guys, but they are very prolific. When it comes to the mini Rex though, I really like feeding them whole to the dogs. So I'll take out all of the internal organs and that kind of thing, but I don't bother in cutting up the meat apart. Whereas with the larger, the fryer size, I kind of need to cut it down a little bit. So for those of you who follow me for my rabbit content, I also raise quail. We raise Cotornics, and they are the largest bunch of dodo brains I have ever owned. Like, they will literally drown themselves for funsies in their water bowls. They will flip their food dishes over on themselves and suffocate. I've even had some of them jump out of their cage into the waiting mouth of my husky. Thankfully, she is well trained enough to understand the word drop it. With that being said, I have had a lot of fun raising these guys. In fact, I like these guys more than I like my chickens. They hatch in about 21 days. You can butcher them out in about 7 weeks, and that's about when they start laying their eggs. And they have a really nice meat to feed ratio. They also come in a lot of colors. Not gonna lie, this really ticked me off earlier when I went to go feed my rabbits. So for those of you that don't know, I mix rolled oats and black oil sunflower seeds in my feed to help with milk production and weight gain with my weanlings. And when I opened up my bag of rolled oats from Producer's Pride, they had something in it. Tiny pieces of corn and other grains. And y'all might be saying, Madison, that's not a big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. It's a huge deal, to be honest. And that is because corn is very high in sugars and carbs and can cause bloat in your rabbits. And bloat in rabbits can be deadly, like extremely deadly. So make sure you are checking your bags of miscellaneous feed for things that aren't supposed to be in there. And always keep gas drops on hand just in case. Before I get into my mixture of things in my rabbit feed, I just want to say it's not necessary. All you need is a complete pellet. I like throwing in the extras though because it gives it a little bit more. A little bit of extra oomph, if you will. It helps give that final condition. It helps bring in a really nice coat for competition and just puts us a little bit ahead of our competitors. It's not necessary if you're just raising your rabbits for meat and they're doing just fine on a pellet. With that being said, what I do is I mix everything together. I'll take 50 pounds of feed, mix it with 3 pounds of oats, and 3 pounds of Boss. What I'll do is I'll then take that mixture and feed a 1/4 cup per pound. If you want a more exact measurement, you want to do about an ounce per pound. But that's just kind of my start go-to measurements. If I notice a rabbit isn't gaining what they're supposed to or is overweight, I can adjust from there. If y'all really want like in-depth reviews when it comes to feed and mixture and everything, if y'all really like my nitty-gritty videos where I get into like care and feed and everything, I have 2 people that you should really follow who are absolutely amazing. Domino the Spot Cat and MMC Bun Club. They have far more time in this field and experience than I do. My child is a spotlight hog, and they're the ones that I run studies through if I'm unsure of the findings. They're also extremely knowledgeable. In fact, it's because of Domino that I'm looking at putting papaya into my rabbit feed. I'm just waiting until our numbers are a little bit lower and I can play with some ratios. But yeah, definitely check those 2 out if you really like the nitty-gritty rabbit care. So this question is in reference to a video I posted last night about finding corn in my rolled oats for my rabbits. And the answer can be kind of personal towards the person running the rabbitry. The safest bet would be do not feed that feed that you found your miscellaneous grains and corns in, just because it can cause bloat and kill your rabbits. With that being said, my rabbits aren't super prone to bloat, so what I did was I took the grain and I put it in a sieve that would allow the corn pieces and the grain pieces to fall out away from the oats. And then I gave the grain pieces that were left over to the chickens. Again, it's one of those things where when in doubt, throw it out. So basically either give it to your other animals or go take it to the store to be replaced. But I thankfully have some really resilient rabbits that if they were to get a tiny piece of grain, it wouldn't make much of a difference. With that being said, it's still aggravating because you want to be able to trust your sources of food. You don't want the grain that you're feeding your animals to make them sick. But it is a really great reminder to always check your feed just to make sure it is good. It doesn't have bugs, it doesn't have mold, it doesn't have anything that could make your rabbits or your other livestock sick. And again, I say, even though I said it like 20 seconds ago, when in doubt, throw it out. So first off, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'm a horrible influence. If I talked you into rabbits, maybe I'll be able to talk you into quail. Because quail are almost as fun as rabbits. Not quite, but almost. So I do use an incubator. This is the incubator I use. I have one other one that's kind of similar, just a different brand. And we are in lockdown of these eggs right here. Hopefully they'll start hatching tomorrow. The reason why I prefer to use an incubator is I am constantly hatching these guys out for sale or to feed my family. And it's just not efficient enough to have broody hens when it comes to quail. And don't get me wrong, there are some people who have had broody hens, they've hatched eggs, they've raised the babies, and they've done fine. The problem with this is that broody hens only hatch a very small handful at a time, and it's very hard to get a quail to go broody and stay on the nest long enough to hatch. Incubators are just far more efficient. With that being said, incubating is like really easy. I collect eggs for about 7 days, I put them point down into their egg turner, and they stay in the incubator for 14 days before I candle them, and I put them into lockdown. And then around day 18 to 21, they start hatching. And they are the cutest little fluff balls ever. When it comes to colors, I'm trying right now to get a bunch of colors separated out so I have different pens for different colors. But for the most part, when it comes to breeding, we do line breeding just like we do with the rabbits, and we switch out roosters, or we'll trade roosters with our friends every once in a blue moon, just to make sure that the genetics are good. But from what I've heard and what I've understand and what I've seen, if there aren't any weird genetic issues such as scissor beak or anything like that, you can continue breeding your rooster lines to your hen lines without a problem. It's when you start seeing the genetic malformations where you want to start switching out your bloodlines. I just picked up 2 new roosters today because for whatever reason, I just have not been hatching very many roosters, and I am low on roosters and I need more. So I just picked up 2 brand new ones that are in quarantine right now before they can meet their hens. These are gas drops. You can find them in the baby section. They have all kinds of prices and all kinds of different flavors and everything. This is the kind I have right now, and these last me forever. They're quite literally just infant gas drops. And this is one of the go-to things that I always have in my first aid kit when it comes to my rabbits. These things have saved so many of my rabbits' lives. Basically, if you get a rabbit with bloat or is having GI problems, a couple of drops of this really, really helps. So the way I use this is if I notice a rabbit isn't eating well or they're starting to bloat a little bit, I'll take a couple of drops of this in a syringe, put it directly into their mouth. And normally within an hour, they're already starting to feel better and the bloat goes away. Again, this is a must in my rabbitry first aid kit. So you do see rabbit on the menu in European countries. I've talked to a lot of people from Italy and France who say that it's quite a common dish. Or at least it is more common than it is over here in the United States. But the reason why you don't see it on the menu in restaurants kind of dates back to World War II Depression era. Back then, it was much more common to raise and was seen as an everyday meat that people could raise. And then we got into the idea after the Depression of the white picket fence and the perfect family and living in the suburbs. So as everyone moved to the city and fewer people did things like raise their own meat and garden and that kind of thing, we kind of see a fall off of people raising meat rabbits. Kind of because we didn't see it fit that white picket lifestyle, that ideal lifestyle. It was seen as a poor person's food. And this was in a time where status was growing and you wanted to kind of appear more well off than you were. Plus, we get into the idea of factory farming and food like chicken and beef becoming more of a commodity and easier to get a hold of. So it fell off in popularity there as well. And then also, as we get through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, we see a rise in rabbits becoming pets. I've talked about it before, where pets are kind of a privilege. In that it costs money to raise animals and then not get anything out of it, it can be seen as a non-necessity. So now there's this change where rabbits are no longer used for food in the mainstream, they're used as pets. And as we see in a lot of ways where cats and dogs, it's taboo to eat them in our society, rabbits are kind of on that line as well. And because it is such a taboo to eat a rabbit, because we see it as a pet, it is not a high seller within the market. And because it is not a high seller in the market, you're not going to see very many restaurants reach out to take a chance on a non-returnable good. In that the meat, you would have to order in small quantities with very little return, or it would spoil in the fridge. For anyone who was wondering about the 105-degree incubator moment where my incubator just decided to jump up in temperature for no reason whatsoever, and I was panicking because I didn't know how hot it was for as long as it was, and I was afraid I fried all my eggs, we have at least 3 hatchlings so far. So we didn't screw up that bad. At least we have some, and we're just starting to hatch, and everything's looking good so far. So remember, if you think you've screwed up a hatch, just try to hatch them anyway, because if I can fry my eggs and hatch babies, you can hatch your babies if your temperature drops by a couple of degrees.